Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. And I'm Ken Decker.
And I'm Yetta Decker.
And together we form part of the Decker team.
Right. So thank you for joining us on the Inside Track. It's a show on real estate and related topics. Every week we cover a new, hopefully a new topic. And so if you would like to have something specific aired or a question answered, whether for this time of year or sometime down the road, that would be great. You connect with us at chri.ca, which would be Decker Team at chri.ca, or right on deckerteam.com.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about condominiums.
We are. And there is, I think, potentially a misconception, maybe not as much today as there was when I started the industry about 2.5 decades ago, but about what a condominium looks like. I think it used to be that it was mostly just a high rise, and then we got into terrace homes and loft homes and townhomes, and even sometimes single family homes are actually in a condominium corporation.
Wow, so really from the road I may not be able to tell whether it's a condominium or not.
You may not. You may have an indication if it's got a small condominium fee if it's on a private, so that would be an indication that if it's on a private road, then at least the road is under a management contract and condominiumized. But if it's an actual condominium, often there is no way to tell.
Yeah, I remember when we were first getting married, actually, we were looking for an apartment to rent. And I was driving by apartment buildings thinking, oh, wow, maybe I could rent here. And then all the nice looking buildings where I really wanted to rent were actually condominiums.
That's right, and they weren't for rent, they were for sale.
Yes.
Yeah, and now sometimes somebody will own a condominium and choose to rent it out through a private source, and certainly in some buildings that's possible.
Yes.
And in other buildings, in fact, that kind of thing is mandated right in the regulations of the Condominium Corporation.
So if I'm buying a condominium that I want as an investment property that I'm going to rent, whether it be a brand new construction or an existing condominium project, I need to find out from the condominium corporation and their rules and regulations as to whether or not I can be a landlord with that condominium and rent out to tenants. And some of them actually have a limit to the number of units that they will allow to be rentals. So you got to do your research to see how many are actually rentals in the condominium
that's
project.
Right, because if there's already their allotted number, another one will not be allowed. Wow. And others won't allow for it at all.
Right.
They're owner-occupied units or homes only.
So when would I find that out? How would I find that out, Yana?
Well, through your condominium corporation documents, and certainly if you're working with a professional realtor, they're going to ask you what you're looking for and what your needs are and what's important to you, and ensure those documents get into your hands, because they are incredibly important and so often are overlooked because you get all caught up in the prettiness of the house and the building and the amenities and the nice pool that's there, and maybe forget to investigate whether or not you can do with the home what you want to do.
So that could be important even if I'm buying a house that I'm not planning on renting, like a townhouse or condo or whatever, and then my lifestyle changes in the future and maybe I get sent to the US for a year for work or whatever. I have to know whether I can actually rent that property out or I got to leave it vacant or sell it.
Right. So it's important just to know the details. And we often refer to condominium just as apartments, but that's really not what it is. It is all types of condominium type properties that are in fact available.
Now, I once heard someone say, be careful buying a condominium because when you open the door, everything you paid for escapes because you're only buying for the air inside. But really, you own everything inside, except for typically the exterior walls, and the roof is owned by the condominium corporation.
Well, depending on the type of condominium corporation. So it really is an individual. It used to be that pretty much all condominiums, in fact, were very inclusively cared for and owned under the reserve fund and under the condominium corporation documents. Now there is all kinds of hybrids of condominiums where certain things are covered, certain things may be a sharing of the cost. In some condominium corporation documents it says windows are not covered at all. In others they're shared at a 50-50 cost with the homeowner and the condominium corporation when they need replacing. And in others they're 100% covered.
So when we're doing up an offer for one of our clients on a condominium, one of the things we do is we make a conditional period on reviewing the status certificate, which is really a certificate that the Condominium Corporation gives, which says where they are, how much money they're behind, or whether they've got reserves, what future maintenance are expected, minutes of the last meeting, which would also cover things that they're thinking of maybe repairing in the future or near future. So we make sure that that offer contains the clauses and the requirement for getting information that's going to keep you, our client, safe. Because that's our biggest priority, right? When we're working with a buyer, is keeping them safe.
Exactly. And those documents would be generally requested by your lawyer. So your lawyer is going to get those documents. It's usually a good 50, 100, 200 pages of paperwork. And they're going to review all of it to ensure that there's no surprises in there on your behalf. And then they'll counsel you as to what you ought to or ought not to do in relation to that property.
Now, there were some horror stories with condominiums with delayed maintenance, people having to change a roof when they weren't expecting to, not having enough reserve fund, or balconies on apartment buildings, all kinds of things like that. And so the government actually increased the strength of the Condominium Act, which is actually a law that regulates how condominiums are managed. And so now, every so many years, a condominium is required to do a reserve fund study. And the reserve fund is really a portion of the condo fees that are received each month. A portion is set aside for future maintenance that they know is going to happen, or future replacement of roof shingles, or flat roof if it's an apartment building, or whatever. There's a reserve fund for that. Now, the problem was there was no way of knowing if it was enough money. So the new act requires engineers to come in and do a reserve fund study, what the future requirements for money are going to be based on the future maintenance that the buildings are going to need. And then they decide whether the reserve fund is sufficient or not, or whether they have to increase it over the next 4 or 5 years to catch up, so that they make sure that there aren't those huge special assessments at the last moment that people have to deal with.
Yeah. And we've talked a fair bit about special assessments on previous shows, but certainly if a special assessment is something that you're concerned about, that again is something your lawyer is going to determine whether it's a probability. Often if there is an outstanding special assessment, it can even make financing the property more difficult. CMHC,
or impossible.
Or impossible. CMHC may say that, especially if it's an insured property with your Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, because you don't have at least 20% down, they can actually say that they're not willing to finance that property.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we had a client who was fully approved through CMHC, ready to close about a week before it was time for her to get her money and put everything away.
And she'd been a homeowner previously, was sound financially, had great credit rating. Everything had been accomplished from her perspective in relation to the property as well. It had already had an appraisal, met the appraisal. Pretty much everything was done.
Yep. And in her approval, it had a condition that they had the right to check the condominium status certificate. They did that. They didn't like something in it, and they refused to pay her the money. Now, we had to scramble to find her second mortgage so that she could get down to 80% financing, so the bank could finance her without going through CMHC. Right. So there are times where we have to really hustle to save our client, and we do everything in our absolute power to make sure that when something unforeseen like that happens, that we come to the aid of that person.
Well, we did, in fact, in that case. Right? We helped her out with the second mortgage because we had some access to funds reasonably quickly because we had no time to spare. So checking with family and friends wasn't an option for her. So we simply ensured that she could purchase the property. And with a conventional first mortgage and a small second, it wasn't a problem. Right? And the reason CMHC had a struggle with it specifically in this case was because the repairs were in the process of being done, and although there were estimates and there had already been the work done, the special assessment was being paid up front by the previous owner, so it wasn't an issue from obtaining the money. Their concern was that potentially there would be more to the repairs than appeared to be the case once they actually got in and began the work.
Because they weren't complete.
Because the repairs weren't complete. So if the repairs are complete, that sort of struggle won't happen. But there was a very isolated case, and it certainly happened to several people that were purchasing in that building right in that season when the repairs had not been completed yet. And so the concern there.
Now, the rules and regulations go along with a condominium.
They do.
And they're found in the management documents and the status certificate. Those regulations can be very varied. They could affect what kind of pet you could have,
right?
Or if you can have a pet at all.
Or if you can have a pet at all. That's right. Even cats in some buildings are not permissible. Not just dogs and that kind of thing, but certainly, and sometimes it's an age limit. How old do you have to be to live in the building?
Right.
Or not so much in a building, but in a community even that's under a condominium corporation. There's so many regulations.
Like you can't change the color of your front door.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
If you wanted to paint it burgundy or green or whatever, you can't do that because the exterior is the condo's responsibility. Sometimes it's around gardening. If you want to put in a little flower garden, or a lot of them allow for it, but you still have to get approval from the management corporation before you go ahead and do it. Or if you want to build a deck or a patio in your backyard, because technically most of them own the land around the building. So
the condominium corporation does.
So your backyard, it's not yours. So if you want to put a deck or something there, you have to get approval for that.
Right. Now you have exclusive use of it. So it is yours and you treat it like yours, and you generally maintain, condominium corporations generally will maintain the property, the land outside of your fenced in area if they allow for fencing. Some of them don't allow for fencing. There's restrictions on heights, lengths, widths, all kinds of things, in addition to what would typically be the case by city bylaws. Right? So lots of restrictions that way. And a lot of times you can still do a lot of things. You just simply need to know what you can and can't do, and then what things are required approvals.
Right.
Right.
Now, there's tons of new condominiums being built. Tons and tons. And they're varying again. Not as many of the big projects where they had a lot of townhomes, but we're seeing a lot of condominiums pop up where they're building on an acre or two and building a lovely building, maybe with some underground parking, and it's maybe got 20 to 40 units in it, fairly small in the way of condominiums go. So there's a lot of that kind of niche being built in certain areas. There's some large complexes being done, and then, of course, the most popular right now is lots and lots of high ranches are going, not high ranches, high
rises?
High rises, that's the word. Thank you very much. Lots of high rises going in that, vary anywhere from 6 to 20 stories, 28 stories, that kind of thing.
Well, and there's even large communities where there's a variety of types of housing: loft homes, terrace homes, townhomes, low rise, high rise, all within a community. So there's more and more of those sort of master planned communities, maybe with 6 phases. So over time, it will completely transform an intersection or a corner of a particular spot in the city.
So if you're thinking of the possibility of maybe a new condominium is in your future, one of the best resources is us. Come and talk to us. We're familiar with most of the condominium builds, the new builds that are starting, even the ones that are 2 years out, 3 years out. We tend to get information on those early before it's even into the public. So if you're just joining us, we've been talking about condominiums in the city of Ottawa and surrounding area, and things that you might want to look out for if you're thinking of purchasing one, some of the pitfalls, some of the advantages. And we're Ken and Yetta Decker.
And you're listening to the Inside Track on real estate. So we're going to continue to chat a little bit about condominiums and what you can expect inside a building. So what are some of those things that I may not think to ask, but I should expect?
Well, expect that condominium fees tend to go up. Okay, the cost of maintaining properties, the cost of management, all of that tends to go up. So whatever the condo fee is now, expect it to be going up. Okay. Not always a lot, but expect it to go up.
And there's often projections years out. I know we were just in the process of selling a condominium not very long ago. Well, we do it quite regularly, but one in particular recently where there was quite an increase slated, because sometimes with a brand new condominium corporation, the fees are less than you would expect, and that's because they're not going to stay that way. So there was actually very heavy fee increases or condominium fee increases projected for the next 5-6 years.
So because it was brand new, they didn't project any real maintenance for the first 5 years, so they could get their condominium fee down. And it's also an incentive for people buying, because they say, oh, look, the condo fee is only, X. It's not that bad, but just know that it is going to go up as the building starts to need
I've never
maintenance.
seen them go down.
No, I haven't either. No, a couple years ago, we had a very heavy snowstorm all winter. We had a lot of snow. And so, we were selling some condos the next spring, and there were special assessments, and that special assessment wasn't terrible, but basically it was a couple extra $100 for the year to cover the extra snow removal, because their contract covered a certain number of visits and a certain amount of removal of snow, and they had to do a lot more.
Right. So rather than dip into the reserve fund, which would have been a lot more effort and work, and they would have had a lot more to prove, it was better and easier simply to assess each homeowner, each unit owner, a small special assessment to take care of that winter's extra.
So if someone was looking for maybe a condominium or a new condominium, what would you recommend for their path? Like, where is there a central area they can find the information?
Well, they come to us.
Oh,
I think that would be the best initial source. Is just come to us. We'll talk about what areas in the city. We have pretty much all of them. We're aware of them. We know what's coming even down the line, even 2-3 years out often. We will get invitations to sneak peeks because we're realtors, and so therefore they want us to assist in selling their product. So the vast majority of condominiums, in fact, they encourage realtors to engage with them and help them introduce their clients to them. Right? And it's not costing you, the homeowner, anymore. It's not like they're going to give you a rebate just because your realtor's not with you. However, it may save you a whole lot of money and help you make way better decisions in relation to what things will be an aid or an asset when you're purchasing, like things that the developer might be charging you extras for that we know really aren't going to give you extra benefit down the road. So we can assist you in guiding you through that part of the process, and the
floor plan
selection, even specifically what suits you. And a lot of times the folks in the sales center, I guess all the time, are there to represent one person and one person only. And that's the developer, the builder, the person that is paying their salary, is the person that is being represented. So they don't have to give you, the new condominium owner, the best counsel.
Right.
They're not obligated to that. Doesn't mean they're not sweet, doesn't mean they're not friendly and not nice, and ultimately at the end of the day their job is to sell the unit.
Yes, and one of their issues, they're ethical, and they, but one of the issues is they only have one product to sell typically, and it's their building, and so their desire is that you buy a unit in their building. Whereas if you're working with the Decker team, it's kind of weird to say, but we don't care which building you buy a building in or a home in, and we just want to make sure that you're getting the best for you, the best match for you. And that's where our buyer guarantee comes in as well, where we guarantee that you'll love your home, or in the first 6 months we'll sell it for free. So we won't charge you our listing fee to resell your home. That's how confident we are that we're going to help you find the right house for you, and not just pigeonhole you into something that's maybe not quite what you wanted or thought of.
And I mean, certainly everybody is smart enough to make a strong decision on their own behalf, but buying a home can be a vulnerable time as well. So we really just want you to be assured that we're going to listen and hear, and just really even listen between the lines of what you're saying as to what's important to you in the next home. Whether it be a condominium or otherwise, but specifically today we're talking about condominiums, because there are so many things and factors to consider, probably even more than in freehold ownership. Right? And so the service guarantee simply says that you're going to love your home or we'll sell it for free. And if you make that decision in the first 6 months of moving in, after that, I suspect it's not so much that you don't love your home, it's that there's other factors that are contributing to your lifestyle choice. So certainly we would honor that. And we've had that in place for over 20 years. And I know when we first talked to our broker, because we worked for another brokerage back then, she thought we were kind of crazy offering guarantees and service guarantees and easy exit guarantees around even signing a buyer representation agreement, and then you, the consumer, you, the buyer, having total control as to whether you want that to continue to be in enforcement. When we suggested that, or I suggested it way back when, the broker thought I was crazy. And to me, it made sense, because if it's not working for you, the homeowner or the home buyer or the home seller, it's probably not working for us either. And so it's much nicer to part friends and not try and cause somebody duress or any stress that's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. So condominiums have been really increasing in popularity. I think it's a lifestyle issue. People don't, they like to be able to come home, not have to cut the grass or do any maintenance or anything that way, except for the inside, which a lot of people enjoy to decorate and that sort of thing. And so the popularity has increased. Also, people are more transient. When I say transient, they want to live in Florida for a couple of months and then come back to Ottawa, and they know that there's nothing to worry about when they leave their apartment or their condominium unit and leave for that amount of time, because the exterior is being looked after.
So the Snowbirds love them. Mm-hmm. And certainly our population, as we have more and more baby boomers that are maybe selling the large family home and maybe purchasing a secondary property somewhere down south, and whether it be in the States or in another tropical country, and then still wanting to own something here. And so they don't need to maintain a large home anymore. It's just nice owning a small property that is pretty much cared for, at least from the external perspective, by someone else. And the other amazing opportunity is for people just getting into the market. Often, to get into all the details of home ownership and all that's entailed, condominium home ownership is a little bit less stressful. There's a little less to do yourself, and also the price point is usually better. Except in the really large executive town, high-rise condos, those are by no means inexpensive. Those are more of a luxury decision, but certainly a lot of the condominiums in our city, you can still purchase many in the $200,000 price range on either side of that, and that's pretty exciting as an entry point into the real estate market.
Yes, it is, and like you say, they have penthouse kind of condominiums in the $1.5 million range,
right?
Or you can have quite affordable. Now, one thing that has been a